Aftermath of the Russian catastrophe and the shifting balance of power. By the beginning of 1813, Napoleon Bonaparte faced the gravest crisis of his career. His disastrous invasion of Russia had shattered the myth of French invincibility. In just 6 months, the Grande Armée had lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers and most of its cavalry, leaving the French Empire militarily exhausted and politically vulnerable. While Napoleon still ruled much of continental Europe on paper, his power rested on fragile alliances with German states in the Confederation of the Rhine, as well as coerced partnerships with former enemies such as Prussia and Austria. The defeat in Russia destabilized this system overnight. Across Europe, rulers, generals, and populations alike sensed that history was turning. In Russia, victory brought both triumph and uncertainty. Some influential voices argued that Russia should stop at its borders, warning that weakening France too much would only empower Britain and unreliable former allies. Tsar Alexander I rejected this caution. He believed Napoleon remained a long-term threat and insisted that Europe must be liberated both to ensure Russia's security and to shape a new continental order. Across German lands, resentment toward French domination simmered beneath the surface. In Prussia, the army retreated from Russia alongside French forces, but loyalty to Napoleon was rapidly eroding. The dramatic Convention of Torregon, signed without royal approval, effectively neutralized Prussian forces and ignited a political crisis in Berlin. Though King Friedrich Wilhelm III hesitated, fearing French retaliation, public pressure and military leadership pushed him toward war. By early 1813, Prussia formally aligned itself with Russia, joining Britain, Sweden, Portugal, and Spanish resistance fighters in what became the Sixth Coalition. Many Germans viewed this moment as the beginning of the so-called Wars of Liberation, a struggle not only against Napoleon but for national dignity. Austria, meanwhile, played a careful double game, withdrawing troops from French service while offering to mediate peace. As diplomats argued across candlelit salons, Russian armies marched westward. Cities fell with little resistance. Populations welcomed the Russians as liberators, and French garrisons were isolated across Central Europe. Napoleon, still in Paris, rushed to rebuild his army, convinced that battlefield success could yet restore his dominance. Rebuilding armies. In the first clashes of 1813, despite the catastrophe of 1812, France retained immense resources. Napoleon mobilized conscripts at unprecedented speed, drafting young men. National Guardsmen, sailors, and veterans were called from distant fronts. On paper, a new army emerged rapidly, but it lacked experience, cohesion, and most critically, the horses lost in Russia could not be replaced, and without cavalry, Napoleon's ability to scout, pursue, and annihilate enemy forces was severely limited. Across the coalition, the situation was similarly strained. Russia's victorious army was exhausted and depleted. Prussia scrambled to expand its forces, and patriotic fervor fueled the creation of militias and volunteer units. Students, intellectuals, and even women disguised as men joined the fight, inspired by the promise of liberation. By spring 1813, these newly raised armies collided. The first major battle at Lutzen revealed both Napoleon's enduring brilliance and his growing limitations. Surprised by a coalition attack on Marshal Ney's corps, Napoleon personally rallied inexperienced conscripts under intense fire. French artillery and timely reinforcements stabilized the line, turning the battle into a costly French victory. Yet the coalition army escaped intact, withdrawing in good order. Soon after, at Bautzen, Napoleon attempted a more ambitious maneuver to encircle and destroy the Russo-Prussian force. Tactical success again favored the French, but miscommunication, stubborn subordinates, and determined enemy resistance allowed the coalition to retreat once more. These victories boosted French morale but failed to deliver a decisive blow. The inability to pursue due to weak cavalry haunted Napoleon. Casualties mounted on both sides, and the illusion of effortless French dominance was gone. Meanwhile, political stakes rose. Austria watched carefully, weighing whether Napoleon's victories were signs of recovery or merely flashes of fading genius. For civilians across Saxony and Prussia, the war brought fear, displacement, and destruction, as villages became battlegrounds and armies consumed everything in their path. The summer armistice and the expansion of the war after the bloody spring campaign. Both sides agreed to a tense summer armistice in 1813. Diplomacy now became as important as battlefield maneuver. The coalition sought to draw Austria into the war, knowing its entry would tip the balance irreversibly against France. Napoleon, confident in his own abilities, rejected compromise peace terms, believing fear and strength were the foundations of his rule. When Austria finally declared war against France, the conflict expanded into a truly continental struggle. By late summer, 500,000 coalition troops faced Napoleon's forces. The Allies adopted the Trachenberg Plan, avoiding direct battle with Napoleon himself and instead targeting his marshals wherever possible. This strategy quickly paid off. French defeats at Grossbeeren and Katzbach exposed weaknesses in leadership, coordination, and logistics. Torrential rain, poor reconnaissance, and coalition cavalry superiority turned retreats into disasters. Napoleon responded with characteristic speed, marching to defend Dresden and scoring a dramatic victory against overwhelming odds. Yet once again, success proved incomplete. His marshals were defeated elsewhere, and a bold attempt by General Van Damme to trap the retreating coalition army ended in catastrophe at Culm, where French forces were surrounded and destroyed. The campaign revealed a new reality. Napoleon could still win battles, but he could no longer control events across multiple fronts. Coalition armies recovered quickly from defeat, coordinated their movements, and learned from past mistakes. By early September, victories at Dennewitz and elsewhere extinguished French hopes of threatening Berlin and shattered confidence among Napoleon's German allies. The balance of initiative had decisively shifted. The road to Leipzig and the Battle of Nations by autumn 1813, the strategic focus of the war converged on Saxony. Coalition leaders planned to unite their armies near Leipzig for a decisive confrontation. Allied cavalry raided deep behind French lines, disrupting supply routes and forcing Napoleon to divert troops for protection. As massive armies marched, the scale of the conflict reached unprecedented levels. In mid-October, over 500,000 soldiers gathered around Leipzig in what would become the largest battle Europe had ever seen. Napoleon, aware that enemy reinforcements were arriving daily, sought to defeat the coalition piecemeal. On October 16, fierce fighting erupted across multiple villages, each changing hands repeatedly amid relentless artillery fire. French infantry assaults and massive cavalry charges nearly broke the coalition center, even threatening the position of the Allied monarchs themselves. Yet timely reinforcements and stubborn defense held the line. Over the next 2 days, coalition strength grew rapidly, surrounding the French army. Napoleon's offers of an armistice were rejected. On October 18, coalition forces attacked from all sides, pressing relentlessly against shrinking French defenses. As Saxon and German allied troops defected mid-battle, the political collapse of Napoleon's system became visible on the battlefield itself. Facing encirclement, Napoleon ordered a retreat through Leipzig. Chaos followed. A premature explosion destroyed the only bridge west, trapping tens of thousands of French soldiers inside the city. Street fighting erupted as civilians hid from bombardment. By October 19, the Battle of Leipzig, later called the Battle of Nations, was over. Napoleon escaped with a fraction of his army, while the coalition achieved a historic victory that shattered French dominance in Germany. Collapse of the Napoleonic order and retreat toward France. The defeat at Leipzig had immediate political consequences. The Confederation of the Rhine dissolved, and German states rushed to abandon Napoleon. Coalition armies pursued the battered remnants of the Grande Armée westward. Although the pursuit was cautious and sometimes slow, French forces were in visible disarray. Hunger, exhaustion, and desertion plagued the retreat. Skirmishes at Hanau briefly demonstrated Napoleon's tactical skill once more, as he smashed an Austro-Bavarian blocking force to escape toward the Rhine. Yet these actions could not reverse the strategic reality. The coalition now debated its next move. While united in expelling France from Germany, tensions emerged between Austria, Prussia, and Russia over the future balance of power. Tsar Alexander favored pressing onward toward Paris, while Austria feared excessive Russian influence. Despite these disagreements, the coalition advanced. Napoleon's empire, once dominant from Spain to Poland, was collapsing inward. For ordinary Europeans, the war's end brought little immediate relief. Roads were littered with corpses, villages lay in ruins, and entire regions faced famine and displacement. The myth of Napoleon, as the invincible master of Europe, was broken, replaced by the image of a ruler fighting desperately to preserve what remained of his power. Meaning and legacy of the 1813 campaign. The campaign of 1813 marked a decisive turning point in European history. It demonstrated that Napoleon, though still formidable, could be defeated by coordinated resistance, strategic restraint, and overwhelming numbers. The coalition learned to respect his genius without succumbing to fear. For Germans, the war fueled early national consciousness and dreams of unity, even if political realities delayed their fulfillment. For Russia, the march from Moscow to Leipzig elevated its status as a major European power. The Battle of Leipzig reshaped diplomacy, dismantled French hegemony in Central Europe, and set the stage for Napoleon's final downfall in 1814. It was a war of emperors and kings, but also of students, peasants, volunteers, and civilians caught in its path. The scale of suffering and sacrifice foreshadowed the industrialized wars of the modern era. When Napoleon returned to Paris after Leipzig, Europe watched closely. His enemies believed the end was near, yet history had shown he could still surprise them. The campaign of 1813 did not end the Napoleonic Wars, but it ensured that their conclusion would come on coalition terms, not Napoleon's.